Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, this Sarah Boone case entered the second day of testimony today, second day of the trial. And we all wonder as we watch this, is why. Well, why did she kill her boyfriend? And why did she not take the very generous plea bargain offered by the court, offered by the judge to manslaughter first degree? It's understandable that she's already done almost 5 years in jail. And if she had copped to a manslaughter first degree, potentially she could have been out in another 4 or 5 years. So she would do a total of 9 to 10 years based on good behavior and the standards. But she chose to fight this. And she's gone through 8 lawyers in a little over 4 years, and she's on her 9th representing her in this trial. And I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to listen to her attorneys trying to tell her, take the plea, take the plea, take the plea. And to which she probably folded her arms across her chest and said, no, I want to fight this. And they're coming up with defenses like self-defense, battered woman syndrome, all of these creative defenses that I believe after the jury sees that video, which they've already seen, I believe, of the suitcase of Jorge. You know, they're calling him George in court. And initially we were calling him Jorge. And many people in the chat objected to that we called him George. But apparently that's what they're calling him, referring to him as in court as George. So I think we'll do that also. But some people took great umbrage that we were somehow disrespecting George, and we weren't. That's apparently what he's called. Anyway, so the big question in this case also is self-defense. No, I don't think this is anywhere near a self-defense. Battered woman? That's really a very difficult thing to prove. And it seemed more like George was the battered man, or they both were battering each other in a relationship that was toxic based on alcohol consumption, alcoholism that both of them seemed to suffer. And I don't say that loosely, but the two of them had a very, very serious alcohol problem. They had a drinking problem. Anyway, folks, so hang on to your seats, hang on to your hats, grab a hold of your loved one, your service dog, your favorite drink. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
Folks, before we move on, we'll have to take a word from our sponsor. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything sports betting. Every stat, matchup breakdown, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during games. With the largest catalog of odds on everything from football, Major League Baseball playoffs, National Hockey League, National Basketball Association, to political props. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bet online, the game starts here. With me tonight to talk about this extremely interesting case is none other than retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney. Welcome to the show, Professor Michael Geary. Mike, welcome.
Hey, William, good evening. Good to see you. This is
You
going
know,
to be a good show.
Mike, there's so much. I guess this case is really interesting to the public because I guess this could be your next door neighbor. This could be a friend. This could be a family member because we all have family members and friends and neighbors that have problems like this. We never get to see inside their home and see at what level is this problem, at what level is their toxic relationship going to lead to murder. And that's certainly what happened here, Mike.
Yeah, the two of them, George and Sarah, they had a toxic relationship for a number of years before the incident occurred in 2020, before his death. And so at least 3 years, I think it was. And during those 3 years, they would beat each other up. The police would lock him up. She would bail him out. He would have her locked up. This sort of thing went back and forth. They were a nightmare couple for any police officer that works with them. If they're your neighbor, and everybody has one somewhere in their past, a neighbor or someone or a coworker, and they're a nightmare to work with. They're a nightmare to live next to. And sadly, this toxicity, reached its apex back in February 2020, and George was killed. And it's sad because it didn't have to be like this, but the dysfunctionality and the dependence on alcohol and the particular mental makeup of these two kept them together, and until the point where a death occurred. And it's really sad, but these are not the kind of people that would probably beat up an old lady in a shopping center, do anything terrible like that. But they would just do these things to each other, and then it ends up in death. It's really sad, and it's all fueled, as you pointed out earlier, by alcohol and their particular personalities. And it was a toxic mix that finally exploded after like 3 years of relationships.
Absolutely. A very interesting comment from the chat. Brian Oblivion. Brian, I think this is the first time I've seen you in the chat. Welcome.
Welcome.
Well, he got into the suitcase willingly, and as far as I know, there's no law that compels you to save someone from their own actions. So once again, why is there a trial? Mike, you want to answer that?
Okay. Well, no, it's true. You can place yourself in danger by putting yourself in a suitcase. You can do that. But we're not really sure how willingly he got into that suitcase, or under what conditions. What did he zip himself up a little bit and she helped him do it all the way? Probably not. It appears probably that she zipped it up all the way, because if he was able to get in and zipper it, he probably would have been able to get unzipper it. But she was there with him. She got him into the suitcase. Whether or not he helped a little bit, under the understanding it was just fun. However, the suitcase goes tumbling down the stairs. He's battered and bruised. The suitcase is lying there, and he tells her, numerous times, "Would you please let me out? I'm suffocating here." So the fact that she actually engaged in actions that ended up in his death makes for a case of good causation. So yeah, he may have done some foolish things and put himself in jeopardy, but her actions combined with his actions resulted in his death. And she had the ability to free him from that suitcase. So yeah, Brian, in a way, you're absolutely right. He did some things himself, but however, he put himself in danger, but she also put him in danger, and she continued to allow him to stay in danger when she could have alleviated the stress, and he could have survived. But great question. Thank you very much. That's a really good question.
You know, Mike, I think Brian Oblivion is correct with his premise. However, who closed the zipper?
Right. That's the
And
thing.
that's
Yeah.
really key here, because I don't think he could close it from the inside. I could be wrong,
Yeah.
but I don't think he could, because if he
Yeah.
could have closed it from the inside, he could have opened it from the inside. So
Right.
she must have closed the zipper to that suitcase, and that's the mens rea, right?
Right.
That
Right.
is the excuse me, that's the actus rea, right? That's the physical act. That's the act that you had to do to make you culpable. Her mental state of mind, was it reckless, intentional, criminally negligent, knowingly? Absolutely, she did it knowingly.
Sure.
Even though she'll be looking for the defense of intoxication, which we discussed that the other night on the show.
Right.
Intoxication is not a defense to an offense.
Right.
Mike, want to just give it a
Yeah.
few words of re-explain it a little bit?
Okay. Yes. Voluntary intoxication. If you drink to excess and you can't even remember what you did, and you woke up the next day and like she did, and there it is on her phone. If she doesn't remember those things, that's not a defense. Voluntary intoxication is not a defense. The only time it could possibly be a defense is if somebody slips something in your drink, like you think you're drinking Coca-Cola and somebody puts something in there, like a Mickey Finn kind of thing, that sort of thing that knocks you unconscious or causes you to be so totally inebriated that you can't even remember what's going on. But that's because somebody did it to you. That would relieve you of your criminal liability. But here, she drank the wine. She did it willingly. It's too bad for her that she can't remember or that she fell asleep. That's too bad. The law doesn't care. You voluntarily intoxicated yourself.
I think I'd like to start off with this. And of course, this happened 4 years ago, over 4 years ago, when this case first came to the attention of the authorities.
I don't think you all understand. He comes at me all the time. He comes at me. So it's either I flee or try to go upstairs and go to sleep. That's usually what it is. I don't know if you talked to Brian about any of that, but most of the time when I flee, I go over there. So.
Right, but you're saying that you guys have been good, and when I asked you yesterday, there was the last incident that you could remember was the curtain rod incident, which you said was a month ago, so give or take. Right, so what do you mean by he comes after you? Like,
he gets belligerently drunk.
mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if you all have looked through my phone yet and seen any of the pictures and the videos that I have taken.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, I started documenting everything.
Okay.
So you all will see in my pictures, bloody fingers, split forehead, he split my nose. I've got this.
Right.
I don't know if Brian told you about it, where I had to have almost I had one really bad surgery, but then it got really, 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 really bad, where I had to go like 4 or 5 more times afterwards and then tend to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then poking me in the back of the leg.
Right.
So it's,
And why are you still with him?
everybody asks me that. When I tell you guys this, I really love him. Like I do. And I feel like I can help him. Like I feel like I could help him, which I did, because he came a really long way from where he was in Philadelphia to moving back to here and to dealing with everything else that he's been dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
I've really helped him. I bailed him out of jail, 3 times. I've gone to every single hearing and every single arraignment, everything that I did for him. Gone to see all his public defenders, go to the state. I've gone to the state. I did everything for him.
This does sound, in her defense, this sounds like a classic battered woman defense. And realize this, she's saying this in the interview after the day after he died, or the morning he died. This is her speaking. So she is talking about how she's being abused, how he's abusive to her, how he's hitting her. So that will help her case a little bit. Mary Bell Filiberti, if she's found guilty and convicted, will she likely receive a longer sentence than what was offered in the plea deal? Maribel, absolutely, because we don't think, us law enforcement experts here, she was offered a plea to manslaughter. We believe that when this trial is over, she's going to be, I think they're going to present to the jury murder second degree, intentional murder, and depraved mind murder. They may offer up manslaughter 1 as a potential, second. If the jury can't decide on murder
Right.
2, then the judge may allow that. But it seems so far by the evidence presented, they have a really good case to try her for murder second degree. Mike, your thoughts on that?
Oh, no, exactly. You're right. She's standing trial for the murder 2, which would be like a 25 to year life. If she happened to be convicted, because maybe the jury did feel that there was some, issues with, maybe she was having flashbacks from him being abusive to her in the past, and they actually kind of, bought into her story and kind of believed her story. And if they did convict her of manslaughter, it doesn't mean she's going to get the time that she would have been given if in the plea deal. Remember, that's a plea bargain. The word bargain is used where you're going to get minimal time for self-convicting. But if you have to go through the entire trial and you get convicted of the same offense that you were going to be given a plea bargain for, no, she's not going to get, I'm 99% sure she would not get the same amount of time that the judge would give her as that sentence. I would think she probably would get a lot more than that. Whatever the maximum is for manslaughter, it may be up to, say, 25 years, whatever it happens to be under Florida law. I don't know. But if she's convicted of manslaughter, she's doing more than what the plea bargain was, that whatever the plea bargain was. If she's convicted of murder, forget it. She may do natural life.
Well, Queen Olive from the chat, Ruth Ann, the minimum the judge can give her is 22 and a half years. He made it clear to her during the hearing.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Florida law, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a heavy duty sentence. And realize,
Yep.
she was offered. But Mike, can he still instruct the jury to consider manslaughter 1?
Probably if the, I would think yes, if the prosecution, request that in instructions, because they may want to hedge their bets a little bit. They may not want to make it a choice for the jury to be murder or acquittal. They may say, they might want to say, okay, well, we're looking for murder, but we'll say manslaughter is a lesser included offense. We would like, Your Honor, the jury to consider manslaughter also as kind of like that backup, so that if they don't want to go for murder, they won't want the jury to say, acquittal. Maybe the jury would settle in the middle for manslaughter. So yeah, that's a possibility. Yes, that's a distinct possibility.
Go back to the interview.
Because I'm trying to help it, because I hope it. And he was trying. He was really trying. And then he starts to think about things, and I think he gets overwhelmed, and then it's like, next thing you know, he's drinking. So it's like, oh man, I know where this is going to go, so I'm going to go upstairs and read a book, or I'm going to go for a bike ride, or I'm going to do something else, where I don't want to drink. I don't want to drink. The occasional wine, whatever, or if it's a weekend, that's when you have a good time. You don't have to wake up the next day. I have to wake up the next day and do things. I have to tend to Lucas. I have to take him to school. I have all this stuff to do. He doesn't know how to, I guess, maintain himself, where I can do 50 things at once and still know the 50 things more prior that I need to get done. He can't process like that. He didn't process like that. So he would literally, not literally, but have smoke coming out of his ears. So the next thing you know, he doesn't want to deal with it. I'm going to go get something to drink. So the majority of the time, I would hang out outside or do something else because I don't want to drink. And every time, his job broke his heart. And it made me sad because he had so much pride in his job. And the store that he took care of so much totally went downhill. Mm-hmm. And that broke his heart because he had put so much work and effort into fixing it up. And his manager was awful and basically gave up on all of the employees. So I think that had a huge bearing on why he would drink so much. His ex-wife is bonkers. She was all over him all the time. Send me money, send me money, send me money. How can I send you money when I don't have a job? And he's still trying to take care of me and Lucas by paying a bill here or there, getting some groceries. So he always had something on his mind, which is why, again, I got the puzzles and the things to try to get him off of it so we don't have a dream, or he doesn't have a dream. So when you all see my phone, you can see all of the damage he has done to me and the videos of him smashing my television because he's belligerently drunk. Where most of the time, I just don't want to be there. And I try to help him. I try to calm him down. Eventually, he just passes out.
So that was over. That was 4.5 years ago when she was first interviewed, when she was brought into the station house. Remember when we saw some of the video, the body worn video by the officers that responded to her home, and we were questioning as to why wasn't she arrested that day? She wasn't arrested that day. They brought her in and they let her go. So to me, that was a little bit bizarre that they interviewed her and she had all this culpability, admitted to things, and they let her go. I didn't quite get that. Did you, Mike?
Well, I'm thinking, yeah, we talked about it the other day. I'm thinking maybe they figured she wasn't a flight risk, and maybe that they would want her to wait, excuse me, until they got the ME's report and to see what exactly he may have died of. I'm not sure, but we do things differently in the NYPD, and you guys in Detective Bureau, you certainly did stuff differently in homicide. I'm just thinking they saw it as, let's make sure, cross our T's, dot our I's, make sure it's not an accident. Let's see if it's an accident or not before we approach her and arrest her. But I believe after this interview, because she was Mirandized, and after this interview, I believe they probably arrested her that afternoon, which would have been, say, 24 hours after the police were first called. But that's my guess. They just wanted to do everything first, make sure they knew exactly what had happened before they made any assumptions, and then arrested her. So
this next piece of video is the pathologist. Her name is Zara Zidowich, and she very succinctly and quite articulately talks about the different levels of asphyxia, suffocation, inadequate oxygen, strangulation, mechanical asphyxia. And I think that's, in this case, it's very important to understand this. So let's play the doctor right now. This was today.
Death, which I put on the death certificate, is positional asphyxia with immediately after death for most people. It's something that would occur a little bit later on in that process of changes that happens after death.
And tell us, what is rigor mortis?
It jumped ahead. When she spoke about positional asphyxia, that's something like we always fear in policing, something called restraint asphyxia. And I had spoken about that a couple of times on the show, where if an officer arrests someone and puts his knee in that person's back, gets the person handcuffed, but doesn't take his knee out of the person's back, which doesn't allow the person's chest to expand while breathing, that person can die from, it's called restraint asphyxia. Very similar to positional asphyxia is what she's explaining, because his body couldn't really expand inside that suitcase. So that's what she was referring to when she spoke of positional asphyxia.
Information, sometimes I have none. It just depends on the particular case.
In this case, what information were you provided ahead of time?
So the information I had was that the decedent was with his girlfriend, and At some point in time in the night, he got into a suitcase, which was then zippered shut. At another point at time, I believe she went to bed, and then the next morning discovered that he was still in the suitcase. And I think that was in about an 11-hour time frame from the information that I had.
You mentioned asphyxia. Can you explain for us what asphyxia is?
Sure. So asphyxia is a very general term. It would be kind of like saying, I drive a car. Right? That's very generic. And we know that there are many different types of cars out there, right? So asphyxia simply means lack of oxygen or inadequate oxygen for an individual. And there are different categories of asphyxia. So you can have suffocation, which just means that there's obstruction of the airways. So that could be smothering, that could be somebody choking on a piece of food, or maybe just being in an environment where there's not enough oxygen in the air to sustain that individual. There's a category called strangulation. That would be compression of the neck, either blood vessels or airways. There's another category called mechanical asphyxia. That can be when the body is in an unusual or abnormal position where the actual mechanics of breathing can't occur. So that can be the position of the body, or it can be like, let's say if a heavy object fell on somebody and you simply can't breathe because of the weight of that object. That would be a mechanical asphyxia. And then there's drowning. That's a different type of asphyxia. And there are a couple of other categories as well that are much less common.
Is there a most common type of asphyxia?
The most common would be ligature compression of the neck. So that would be like an event, a hanging. That would be the most common that we would see.
You also mentioned environmental suffocation. Could you tell us a little bit more what that means in more layman's terms?
So that just means there's not enough oxygen in the environment that the person is in. You could think of somebody who's in an enclosed space where there's a fixed amount of oxygen. So as that oxygen is, as that person is breathing, they're using up all the oxygen. And once it's gone, there's no oxygen left. Or you could think of maybe people who are, climbing Mount Everest. There's not as much oxygen up there, and that's why they have oxygen tanks. So it just means that the amount of oxygen available in the air around that person is not enough to sustain them.
In this case, what can you tell us about how long Jorge Torres was in that suitcase?
There's not a really good way for me to give you a time frame as to how long he was in that suitcase. Again, because there was both the component of positional asphyxia, being in an unusual position for a period of time, and then also the environmental suffocation component. Because within that suitcase, certainly there's going to be oxygen, but it's not going to be the same as if you were sitting in a room like this. And because there are those multiple components happening at the same time, there's not a really good way to estimate or say with scientific certainty, oh, he was in for X amount of time. There's really not a good way to do that.
How about, is there any good way to approximate or determine the time that Jorge Torres died?
There's not a good way to do that either, again, because there are so many different components at play at the time of his death. Sitting in a normal room like this, the percentage of oxygen that's available is about 20 to 21%. If that were to drop to 10 to 15%, the person can be impaired with judgment, they can be impaired with activity. Once that percentage drops between 8 to 10%, most people will lose consciousness. And at a percentage of 8% oxygen or less, that's when we would expect the death to occur. And so again, there's not a really good way to measure the amount of oxygen that would have been available to him in that suitcase, in addition to the fact that he was in an unusual position.
So very, very interesting. And I mean, I can feel as she's explaining all this, she's doing a hell of a job. I'm sure she's also a professor because she's very articulate and she explains it well for the layman. But when she speaks about there's no really good way to determine time of death, and there are ways, but there's not a way that is absolute. And one of a bunch of the ways, of course, body temperature is one. Um, Rigor mortis, the body goes into rigor mortis at a certain time, and then it comes out of rigor mortis. Lividity, absolutely lividity. She mentioned some other states that the body goes through, the colors of the lips and the eyes, but none of those in itself is a determining factor in time of death. One of the best ways is to talk to an eyewitness. And in this case, they did. They spoke to Sarah. She was interviewed. When was the last time you saw him alive? What time was it when he was yelling from inside that suitcase? So we determined that. We know at the very least he was alive at that time. And then when she says she went to sleep for 11 and a half hours at whatever it was, sometime between the time that she last spoke to him inside that suitcase and when she woke up in the morning and discovered him dead inside that suitcase, there is a good time frame right there of when, it's between certain hours that he died, Mike.
Yeah, that's they, as you say, they can't always get it down to, a time frame that you would feel comfortable saying he died within 20 minutes or whatever. Yeah. So that doctor would have to look at all the factors, like you said, all the information that she gets from doing the examination, the autopsy of the body, plus all the other information she gets from detectives and eyewitnesses and things like that. So I'm glad that she didn't try to put it down, say, oh, he died within 25 minutes, or he died in 15 minutes, or he died in 2 hours. That would be 2:00 in the morning. No, there's so many factors that she pointed to that affect, the body, the position the body's in, the environment, how hot it is, how warm it is, how cold it is, that sort of thing. So I think she did an excellent job. And for this case, everybody knows that George died between whatever that time stamp is on that video that you just talked about, and when she called 911 and said he's purple,
Right.
that's it. So, that's the best they can do. And so it's really not necessary to say exactly when, but just the fact that, it happened between, one particular time, like 11 p.m. and like noon the next day. But yeah, that is difficult. That's, we always want to hear, like you'd see on TV, oh, the person died, and they'd almost try to get it down to within a 15-minute time frame. But that doesn't always happen.
No, not at all. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. If you're not subscribed, just hit that red subscribe button on the screen. If you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels. We also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels, and we appreciate all of our fans, our friends, our subscribers. And Therese from the chat, thank you so much for the $7.99 super sticker. Thank you, Bill and Mike, for sharing your expertise with this case. Thank you, Therese, very much appreciated. It's when you hear the testimony of the pathologist, you can really get to feel almost George's pain, like how he must have suffered being in that. The dimensions of that suitcase were given on the trial on the first day, and I believe, if my memory suits me, it was 29 inches long, 20 inches wide, and just a little less than 9 inches deep. Right. Not a lot of room in there. Not a lot of space that oxygen would come in. And once you used up all the oxygen there, she said, I believe, once the oxygen level goes below 8%, you're going to die. And obviously, that's what occurred here. So I think that this is done very specifically to present this to the jury that, yes, she could have saved his life, but instead, we'll play some more of that video later, but she just watched him die.
What position were you able to determine he was in that suitcase?
I wasn't able to see what position he was in. By the time that our medical legal death investigators were at the scene, he was already removed from the suitcase. Based on some of the findings, I favor that he was most likely in like a fetal type position. So knees flexed, arms flexed, and the head most likely flexed forward. But again, that's from my findings. I didn't see what position he was in.
What side of his body would he be resting on in this fetal position?
That's that most likely his left side. However, I do say the caveat that some of the findings are dependent on time, meaning that, if that suitcase had been moved or flipped over, that could be different than what I'm seeing at the time of my examination.
Tell us, what is skin slippage?
So after death, the body goes through a series of progressive changes. And one of those changes is skin slippage. And what that does is it tells me that that person is a little bit further away from the actual time of death. So it's not something that's going to occur immediately after death for most people. It's something that would occur a little bit later on in that process of changes that happens after death.
And tell us, what is rigor mortis?
So rigor mortis is also called the post-mortem stiffening of muscles. And again, that's one of the changes that occurs after death. Most of the times that will occur before we see skin slippage. But these changes are very variable from individual to individual. And it also depends a lot on the environment the person is in. So for example, those changes that we're going to see happen more quickly in a warm environment. Somebody who maybe is engaged in a physical or violent struggle, those changes are going to occur more rapidly. And then it also depends on the person themselves, their relative size, their relative health. Those things can all impact the changes that we see after death.
How does skin slippage and rigor mortis inform your findings about how long Jorge Torres was likely in that suitcase?
So again, the time frame that I had was about 11 hours, just from the last time that he was known to be in the suitcase versus the time that he was found. So I'm basing it off of that. So about an 11-hour time period. Well, when I did my examination, the rigor mortis was already dissipating or leaving. Also, there was some skin slippage. And so if he had not been in the suitcase, if he had been out of the suitcase, I would not expect that advanced amount of change. It's compatible with him being in that suitcase for a longer period of time. It would have been warmer. And also if he had been, struggling to get himself out, engaging that physical activity, those are things that are going to accelerate or speed up that process. So my findings at the time of the examination are compatible with that 11-hour time period or, somewhere around there.
Additionally, did you note any injuries to the body of Jorge Torres?
Yes.
These injuries that you noted to the body of Jorge Torres, did you document them on what's called a body chart?
Yes, the diagram on a body chart, and we also take pictures as I'm going through my examination.
They're looking at the body chart.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll
Your
put
Honor,
it
may
up on the
approach the witness
screen or
who's
not.
been previously marked for identification and shown to defense as states R.
You may.
Ma'am, I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as states R. You recognize this document?
Yes.
And can you tell us, what is this document?
That's a copy of my body diagram.
Sorry.
Oh, it's a copy of my body diagram.
And does this fairly and accurately represent the diagram that you created in this case for George Torres?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to move what's previously been marked for identification as states R into evidence.
No objection.
What was pre-marked as states R will be received into evidence without objection as states 12.
Your Honor, request permission to publish.
Yes, sir.
He's going to put it up on the screen in the courtroom so they could see it up on the projector, and they're zooming in to see the body chart where his injuries were.
So, ma'am, on this body chart, can you describe for us and point out what was the first blunt impact injury that you identified?
So there were some blunt impact injuries to his head. I don't think it's on this one, but there were some blunt impact injuries to his head right up here around the eye and on the mouth area.
And then, did you notate any injuries to his hand?
Yes, so there were some ecchymoses, or you can think of that as like a large kind of bruise on both hands.
What other blunt impact injuries did you identify?
So there was a series of ecchymoses on the left side of the back, right about here.
And any others?
There were some on the forearms as well.
And you use this body chart, you say, in addition to photographing the injuries that you document, correct?
Yes.
As part of your examination, and I believe it's on the body chart itself, do you document the height and weight of the person as well?
Yes.
And what was the height of Mr. Torres?
So technically for us, it's length. Height is the measurement that's taken while someone is standing. So his length was 62 inches and his weight was 103 pounds.
In regards to these blunt impact injuries, how is it that you come to the conclusion that these injuries were the result of blunt impacts?
So these are typical wounding patterns for blunt force trauma. And when I say blunt force trauma, that can mean something striking a part of the body, or on the other hand, it can be the body striking an object. And that causes injury to the skin, to the soft tissue, and sometimes the deeper tissues, depending on how severe or how strong that blunt force trauma is.
Are these injuries consistent with a person being struck with a baseball bat?
They could be, yes.
Are they consistent with a person being pushed down a flight of stairs?
They could be, yes.
Can you say whether or not these injuries occurred while George Torres was in the suitcase?
No.
Why is it that you cannot say that?
So all of these injuries seem to have occurred around the same time, meaning that they're relatively acute or new. They're not things that are healing or something that happened last week. So they all occurred around the same time. But you can't really look at a bruise or a contusion and say, oh, that happened 2 hours ago. There's not a good way to do that.
Are these injuries consistent with them occurring while he was inside the suitcase?
Yes, they could be.
As part of your examination, do you also check the toxicology of George Torres?
Yes.
And is that something that's pretty standard in any autopsy?
Yes.
And what were the toxicology results for George Torres?
So there was a blood alcohol level of 0.139 milligrams per deciliter. And there was also caffeine and nicotine detected as well.
That level of alcohol, is that over the legal limit in the state of Florida to drive?
Sure. So for driving under the influence, that's a 0.08. So that is higher than that.
What does that alcohol level at the time of your autopsy tell you about George Torres's level of impairment 11 hours earlier?
So I don't necessarily know that it was 11 hours earlier, but it was at the time of death, at or near the time of his death. That's what the blood alcohol level was. So at that level, everyone reacts a little bit differently to alcohol. And some of it has to do with whether or not somebody is accustomed to drinking alcohol or if they've never had alcohol. So you can develop tolerance. But at that level, there's going to be impairment of judgment. There can be impairment of motor skills. There can be slurring of words, something that's called disinhibition or lack of inhibition. And again, it's really variable from person to person, but those are the common things that you would see at that level.
I think that some of the things that we've learned from this pathologist is that, which also goes into intent, is that Sarah Boone caused blunt trauma to George's body. And whether it was from pushing the suitcase down the stairs or hitting the suitcase with a baseball bat, those injuries were consistent with what the pathologist just said was blunt force trauma, which goes to, again, Mike, intent. You want to explain that a bit?
Right. It would appear, and that's what the DA is trying to show through the medical examiner's testimony, is that there was an assault going on in addition to him being in the suitcase, that he was subjected to either being hit from the outside, as you said, something impacting the body, the skin, the hands, the back, or the body actually hitting something. And so therefore that circumstantial evidence would indicate that the jury could believe that either he was hit with a baseball bat while he was in the suitcase, or the pushing down the flight of stairs while he's tumbling down caused all that bruising to his body. And so I think that's really important for the DA to establish that, along with the blood alcohol content level of George. It may not seem like a lot because he's not driving, but it goes to the fact that he may not have been that aware of the danger, or he may not have been aware that, or he may have been physically incapacitated where he could not resist being put in the suitcase. So I think they're really minor points, but they are very important points to establish. So I thought the DA did a good job, very clean testimony, no objections, of course, from the defense. And I think she was well spoken, and they got across some really good points in that direct examination.
Even when the defense gets a chance to question the pathologist, she's very low key and she's just presenting the facts as known to her. I wonder if they even have their own pathologist, their own expert that will go against what this doctor says. What could they possibly try to refute here? He's got blunt trauma injuries. He died of asphyxia. What could a defense expert say that would disagree with what Dr. Zara Zadowicz, what she said?
That would be very difficult to get someone because it's going to be very expensive. So I don't know if they have the resources to do that. But perhaps they would like to get somebody up on the stand to say, perhaps, he didn't die from asphyxia. Perhaps he may have also had a heart attack or something, and it may have been induced partly by his alcohol consumption. That sort of thing to establish some sort of reasonable doubt in the jury's mind as to how George actually died. Did he die of asphyxia, or did he die of a heart attack that he may have had anyway if he had been just sleeping in his own bed? So that would be interesting. And sometimes it comes down to, in these cases where you have a fairly well-funded defense, that they will bring in witnesses, expert witnesses, to contradict the prosecution's expert witnesses. And then it comes down to a decision by the individual jurors. Who do they credit more? The defense's, expert witnesses, or the prosecution's expert witnesses? I don't think they will. I don't know if they have that kind of funding to do it, but they if they had the money and they could get somebody, they would definitely do it.
Mike, one of the interesting things in this case is that most people are used to the old 12 jurors. There's only 6 jurors
That's right.
on this case and 8 alternates. So there is a total of 14, but there's only 6 that count, whose votes will count.
Right.
Why is that? Why did they go with 6 and not 12?
It's up to the state. The state doesn't have to do the 12-person jury. It's just what state legislature wanted to do. I think in New York, we do the 6-person juries for misdemeanor cases. And I think it's a regular 12. But, in other states, maybe that, like, say, Alaska, where you don't have a huge metropolis of people that you could pick for jurors, you may get 6-person juries. But I was surprised at that, too. I thought it would be a 12-person jury. That's just the way they do it in the state of Florida and in that county. Yeah.
Now, this here is the most disturbing part of this case, and to me, practically the entire case.
Oh, yeah.
This is the suitcase with Jorge Torres inside it. Yelling out to her.
For everything you've done to me. For everything you've done to me. Fuck you. Fuck you.
That in itself.
Stupid. That's my name. Don't wear it on.
I can't fucking breathe, babe. Seriously.
Yeah, that's when you do when you choke me.
Sarah. Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
That's on you.
Sarah, I can't breathe.
It's on you.
Sarah.
Real ransom. Might want to give it for it extra. Because I got this.
Sarah.
Real ransom.
Sarah. Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
Oh. That's what I feel like when you jingle me.
Sarah.
Fuck you.
Can't breathe, Sarah.
Yeah. You should probably shut the fuck up.
Sarah.
For the record, that was IMG_1062.MOV, now publishing 1063, same respective file name.
So very difficult, I think, to watch that and to understand how another human being who said she was in love with this man when she was interviewed, that she stood there and with her phone recorded him begging for his life and begging for her to let him out of that suitcase. And we all heard her laugh and taunt him and say all kinds of other horrible things to him. And then at some point, She walks away and drunkenly passes out, goes to sleep, and wakes up the next day, which is at least 11 hours later that we've been told, and goes and finds him dead inside that suitcase. Difficult to understand how another human being could do that to someone. And if they do that to someone, I would say there is malice involved. It is not without malice, Mike. I think there's malice, which makes that qualify for intentional murder in the second degree. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Either it's malice or forethought, where she had this design to try to get him somewhere along the line in that drunken evening. She had this idea and she executed on it. So that would be malice or forethought. That's classical murder. Or perhaps that during the evening they're drinking and she's starting to remember how maybe abusive he had been to her in the past and some of the fightings and that they had. And she wanted to teach him a lesson. And so maybe she designed to try to get him into a suitcase or get him into a position where he was vulnerable and then wanted to teach him a lesson. And so she recklessly endangered his life. But that would seem to be more of a manslaughter kind of thing until he says, I can't breathe. And then at that point, she's on notice that he's about to die. He can't breathe. He's telling her, I can't. This isn't funny. Please let me out. At that point, even if she wasn't intending to kill earlier, she intended to kill then because she did not let him out. So you were absolutely right. Either way that you look at this, whether you give her a little play in the beginning and say, they were just messing around and she was a little mad. She wanted to treat him, teach him a lesson, but she never really wanted to kill him. The fact is, the moment he says, I can't breathe, she's on notice that he's going to die. Either way, it's malice. It is totally malice at that point because she's actually taunting him. She's cursing him and she's letting him know she's the boss.
Absolutely. Back to the showing the suitcase again on the screen. He's 5'2", 103 pounds for those guys in the chat that wanted to know that. They're going to show some pictures up on the screen, I believe. Let's see if we can.
No other questions of this witness?
Any cross-examination?
Good afternoon, ma'am. I believe you stated on direct that you were called to the scene and you were asked to do your analysis out there. Is that correct?
At least a download.
What type of phone was this?
An Apple iPhone XS.
And how were you able to get into the phone, for lack of a better word?
I was provided with the phone's passcode.
Okay. With an Apple phone, without being given that passcode, are you able to get in an Apple phone?
Maybe not necessarily unlock the phone, even though that is an option through some of our advanced tools that is supported. But it can have the ability to download the phone even in a locked state and pull 80, 85% of that data.
Is it a much easier process when you have the code?
It's quicker, yes.
And how were you provided that code?
I believe either through Detective Copsel or Connolly at the time, or I may have asked Ms. Boone just to reconfirm the passcode.
And did she give you the passcode?
Yes, somebody did, yes.
Now, on the first exhibit that went up, or when you're talking about the communications or the identifying factors of the phone, one of the things that were identified is dates and times. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. Also, you said it would tell you if the source was incoming or outgoing. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And then you said it could identify either by phone number or name. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. On the examples that you gave us, who was the identifying name as to the outgoing on this phone?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Who was the identifying name for the outgoing texts or calls on this phone?
I think in some of the line items that were shown above, it was just listed as a phone number.
Was there ever a name listed?
A physical name, possibly in other line items, but in this, and again, in those excerpts, it's just by phone number.
Okay. Did you?
This could be a little bit boring here, talking about the phone. I'm surprised they didn't challenge the fact that it seems they didn't get a search warrant, that they had permission, perhaps, to go into the phone from Sarah Boone, and that they didn't contest that, it seems, Mike.
Yeah, I'm sitting there as the prosecutor's going through that direct examination of the medical examiner and the technician there, and we saw the reports and about the forensics, and then we saw this. You don't hear at all the defense attorney challenging anything, and maybe he was told not to. Maybe Sarah is the one who's actually calling the shots herself, and when she feels it's appropriate, she'll do it. And she wants him to stand down. But, you know, I'm surprised how fast everything's going in and there's no objection. So I'm not sure whether he's actually just, has nothing to say, which would be kind of weird because that's how you make your money, by objecting and protecting your client, or she's the one who's just saying, he's maybe there sitting there and waiting for her to ask him a question and give her legal advice. And she is actually the one who is really the one who's in charge there. I'm not sure, but it is kind of strange. You don't see this in a New York City courtroom whatsoever. You get very combative, very sharp, defense attorneys. I'm not doubting, Mr. Owen's ability whatsoever. I'm just saying he's darn good, but I'm not sure why he's not objecting. And I think it may be because she's told him, I'm in charge. I'm not sure.
I think that also at some point they will make the decision, but it seems like that her intention is to testify.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that her attorneys probably would advise her not to. And I could think that it will only get worse for her if she testifies. And I cannot see her being viewed as a sympathetic character inside that courtroom after the jury has watched the video of her refusing to come to the aid of George as he was inside that suitcase dying of asphyxia. Mike?
Yeah, she's in a real dilemma, Billy. She said that she's suffering. This is self-defense. She was a battered woman. This is battered woman syndrome. She was scared for her life, and which means that she actually has to get up. 99.999% sure she really has to stand up and get on that witness stand and tell the jury why she did what she did and how she did it, because she's got to convince them. This is an affirmative defense. She doesn't have a lot of people who could speak for her, family members that could talk about how abusive George was or how she was beaten to a pulp numerous times. She doesn't have that. She's got to be the one to make her case personal and to appeal to the jurors' emotions and say, look, be in my shoes and testify as to what she was experiencing that night. And it looks bad. Yes, it looks bad, but this is what I was thinking. I was afraid. I didn't know what to do. And I passed out. I'm sorry, but I was afraid. She has to make that case. The problem is she's in a pickle because when she does that on direct examination in her case, when she's being asked questions by her defense attorney on cross-examination, the prosecutor is going to be able to load up that video and show the jurors again. You mean this guy begging for his life was threatening you? How does, and then really just let the jury see that video again, and just to remind them, look at George sitting there. Look how helpless he was. He was begging for his life. She's got a real uphill climb. She's painted herself into a corner, and I don't think she's going to be able to pull it off. She's got to come across as a woman who was fearful of her life in that instant. I don't think she can do it.
No, I don't either. Kylie K. Cosmos. That's what I heard, Sarge. Something to do with a narrative type testimony.
That's not good.
And she isn't led by questions. Classic Sarah. Yeah.
That's not good. Absolutely not good.
No, not at all.
No.
City life. She thinks she's slick, but her death row is inevitable. Well, there's no death row for this case, but she will get at least 22 and a half to life if convicted of murder, second degree. But we're all expecting, of course, to see or to hear her testify. And I think that's what she wants. I think she's like a narcissist where she just really wants her day in court. She wants the attention. Kylie K. Cosmos, I am a survivor of extreme DV abuse. I'm very sorry to hear that, Kylie. It's ignorant to say that she should have just left, and I do believe that it was mutually toxic.
Yes.
Kylie, I understand all this, but I think when it comes to the level of someone's going to die, if she was that afraid of him, then she should have called 911 and have them let him out of the suitcase. But to walk away from that when he was screaming for his life is, as we all watch this, it's indefensible. You cannot defend that behavior. Kylie Cosmos, again, I'll read your second. But she engaged in behavior, and I haven't seen anything that would suggest self-defense. I haven't either. And this is, of course, a tragic, really a tragic train wreck that we're watching. That's what we're watching. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, you got to remember, too, that George had 2 children, I think, by a prior marriage. So they don't have a dad. And her son, who's being raised by her ex-husband. Now that son doesn't have a mother. And, the mother, instead of being around the block, a couple blocks away and have an exchange on the weekends and see both his mom and his dad, his mom is looking at, maybe 25 years in prison. And so, every 2 families have been hurt very deeply. George lost his life, and at least 3, maybe 4 kids have lost a parent. And then it's a really tragic situation for everybody concerned in this case. Nobody's a winner in this case at all. It's terrible, really terrible.
No, I want to just play a little bit of the local news station, their report on this, just to get a view. This was during this afternoon.
George Torres with, and we also saw the bottles of wine that Sarah and George had been drinking that night. Now, a couple of things about the baseball bat. So the person who performed the autopsy on George Torres was brought up as a witness today, and they went through all of the injuries on his body. I believe she said there were at least 5 to 6 blunt force trauma injuries on George Torres's body. And when the assistant state attorney had asked, could that be because of a baseball bat? The witness said, yes, it could be.
Yeah, it was that was certainly an interesting exchange. I think as she was asked about that, the injuries with the baseball bat. Could the injuries be consistent with being pushed down the stairs? Are they consistent with being inside the suitcase? Yeah. I think that was certainly an interesting exchange there. I've seen a couple of people.
Garrett, I would like to point out one thing just quickly. She did say that she did not think the blunt force injuries caused his death. She believes that he died because of suffocation, that he couldn't breathe.
Yeah, and there was I'm glad you clarified that. There was a lot of discussion about that, and also even in the cross examination, a lot of questions about basically other health conditions as well. That it sounded like the defense was hoping would make it sound like heart disease and some other things may have played a role in this as well.
Yes, so Sarah Boone's attorney, James Owens, he did bring up a potential heart condition that Jorge Torres might have had just on looking at his body. The forensic pathologist basically said that she still believes that he died not because of natural causes, but because of the suffocation, that he couldn't breathe. And then Sarah Boone's attorney had asked, well, if he had gotten out of the suitcase and Sarah Boone found him dead on the couch the next day, and he died, would you say it was because of that heart condition? And she said, maybe. Like, yes, I could. But she said that when you're looking at something like this, natural born or natural causes is not what she would think is the reason that he died. It's because of the lack of oxygen that he had for many, many hours.
Yeah, Stephanie, I'm glad you brought up that point about being asked about the, had he gotten out of the suitcase, would he still have died? I thought it was interesting that the prosecution did not object to that line of questioning, because a lot of times when you hear kind of speculative kind of situations like that, the prosecution, it seems like, is often very quick to jump in and say, objection, judge. And we didn't hear any of that this morning.
Yeah, we really didn't. But I think the state feels confident in, like you were saying, the evidence that they have, especially the cell phone video that they were playing today. We heard before the break that when we come back from break at 2:00, that it could be 4 to 5 hours left of what they want to get done today. And Sarah Boone's attorney had told me before court that they believe the state will be done presenting all of their evidence today, and then it will move on to the defense. But they have to get through that part. So now when we come back, they're going to have to ask the jury, is it okay to stay late? Because the jury is only supposed to be here till 5:00. And we know that one of the jurors has an issue with childcare, that they have to pick up their kid at a certain time. So the other reason I wanted to bring this up is because they said it's going to take 4 to 5 hours that they want to go through video. And I'm now wondering, just based on what we've seen already presented, if that will be the interrogation video, which I believe is 2 hours, if I'm remembering off the top of my head correctly. That interrogation video of Sarah Boone right before she was arrested, when she was talking to investigators, when they showed her the cell phone video inside that room.
Yeah, that certainly sounds like the indication there. And that will be interesting to see, because we also know that was the subject of a lot of these motions leading up to this trial, was trying to get some of those statements made to detectives thrown out. Obviously, ultimately, that was unsuccessful. The judge saying, no, this evidence will not be suppressed. This evidence will be allowed to be presented. And it sounds like this afternoon that is what we are going to get to see. Now, I know this interrogation video is something that you are very familiar with. If you could just kind of lay out for folks what we can expect to hear from that, if that is indeed what we get to see this afternoon.
Well, we've already watched that, so I'm not going to go through that again. But very, very interesting. The state is they may have finished today with their whole case, and now it'll be the defense trying to challenge it. And to me, the video is the whole case. I mean, you cannot get past that video. And the icing on the cake is the blunt trauma. That she hit him with a bat while he was inside that suitcase. I can't get past that either, Mike.
Yeah, that video is it's not very long. It's only a few minutes, but when you're watching that video, and it seems like it goes on forever because you're waiting for her or to open up the suitcase, or for him to be able to get a finger through and kind of move the zipper there. It's really heartbreaking because it takes so long. It's so quiet. And he's just saying, please, baby, please, I can't breathe. Sarah, I can't breathe. He keeps saying it over and over. And you're waiting for her to do something constructive to end it. And she doesn't. And that really has an impact for the jury because they're going to watch that. They watched it once. They're going to, I'm guaranteeing they're going to watch it again. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like some of the things you have seen crime scenes, I've seen crime scenes, you get there, and that will stick with you for decades. You'll remember that crime scene because of what you saw. You can't unsee it, and it's memorable. So yeah, this is this case will wind down very quickly, and I doubt it will take more than a few hours of deliberation. This isn't going to be prolonged, dragged out kind of case where there's jury deliberations going on forever. I don't see it. I think this case will end very quickly, and I'm thinking pretty much it's going to be a conviction for murder and maybe a manslaughter if there's a few people who might hold out. But I think this is a that video was the cherry on top, the sundae with the cherry on top. That's it. Boom.
Sorry about that. I had some technical difficulties here. I couldn't get the video off the air.
I can hear you good. Okay.
Yeah, I apologize. I had a rogue video that was playing. It wouldn't go off the air. So very interesting first day of this case. So second day actually, but again, there's not a ton of witnesses here. No. This case is all about that video. It's all about that video. Of course, prior experiences that Sarah Boone has had with Jorge Torres in being involved with the police and domestic violence, and the police have been there many, many times. So if you're a juror, watching this case, watching the video of Jorge Torres yelling from that suitcase, Sarah, I cannot breathe. Sarah, you got to help me. Sarah, I can't breathe. What are you going to vote? Mike, what are you going to vote on this?
Yeah, you got to. I mean, it's really clear she knows he's begging. It's not like he was begging and she couldn't hear him. She was upstairs. No, she's recording it and she forgot she recorded it. So when she went to the police station the next day and they saw it, that was it for them. They knew this was not a real accident. But yeah, you hear that? No matter what you think of Jorge Torres, whether or not you think maybe he was verbally abusive or physically abusive in the past and they had a toxic relationship, no human lets that person who they told the cops 24 hours later, I love him so much, that you're going to let that person sit there in that suitcase and you're not going to help him. That shows a real coldness, a real anger. And so to me, there's really not a lot of discussion. It's malice forethought. That's murder.
Yeah, I think that everyone watching this pretty much agrees with that, Mike. Let me just play a little bit of this on the screen.
Wasn't really. I hid upstairs in the shower, and then came downstairs because I was tired of hanging out in the shower.
Okay.
So that's when he was playing around in the suitcase. So because we both thought it was funny that, oh yeah, well, I'm going to zip you up. You didn't come look for me. So again, it's a broken suitcase, but.
What do you mean by broken?
It's only got one of these, but because I didn't zip it up all the way, he was doing the.
You mean it doesn't have like the pull part?
Correct.
Okay, but
it's got. I think it's got a, what do you call it? A paper clip.
Okay. So the zipper to it is missing, like the actual zipper that attaches to it to help you open and close is missing, but you think a paper clip was on it instead?
I believe there's a paper clip on it, because I know that the last
That's
time.
what you used to like help assist you?
Well, or you can just stick your fingers in there and
Right, yeah.
unzip it yourself, which is why I did not zip it up all the way.
Okay. So how much did you zip it up?
I mean, I don't really know.
You said his fingers were able to stick out?
Yeah, two fingers.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm figuring he'll get it. But then I wanted to go upstairs and waited for him, and eventually I guess I fell asleep. I had the dogs in the bed with me, was warm, and then fell asleep.
So you guys are joking, he's in there, you said you could see two of his fingers?
Yes.
And then, like, you just decided, okay, I'm gonna go upstairs now, or?
Because I figured he would get out and then go upstairs and have intimate relations like we normally do. But I fell asleep.
Okay.
And he never came upstairs. So again, I'm thinking he's downstairs on the laptop earlier today. And then remembered.
Okay. So is this something that do you guys play hide and seek before you have sexual intercourse, or do you guys just play hide and seek because you're bored and you're just trying to pass time and it's fun?
We were again puzzled out. Can't paint anymore. Even started to purge some of the art that's on the wall now. So
That's crazy.
New developments in a suitcase murder.
It's first of all, I don't think anyone believed that story, that she felt that he was going to be able to get out of the suitcase and then he would come upstairs and they were going to have sexual relations like they always did. I'm not buying that at all. But instead I passed out, like he's begging you to get him out of the suitcase, and she just figured somehow through osmosis he was going to escape the suitcase and they were going to have relations like they always did. Was this like foreplay? What was this? Is this hiding the suitcase foreplay? Is there anyone on the jury or anyone that's listening to this show right now going to believe that? Mike?
Bill, it gets creepier and creepier because I had not heard that section of testimony of the tape, of her tape saying that. That is, it's creepy. It's just really creepy, and it doesn't pass the straight face test whatsoever. That he's begging for you to let him out of the suitcase because he can't breathe. He's all curled up in a fetal position that you helped him get into, and then you push that thing down a flight of stairs. Maybe you also hit him with a baseball bat. You're going to go wait upstairs in the bedroom and wait for him to come up like Romeo, and you're going to have a Romeo and Juliet moment. I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think anybody is going to believe that. I think they're probably going to look at her and think she's just an out and out liar, and there's no truth whatsoever.
Yeah, it's sort of tough to believe, tough to understand. But tomorrow will be day 3, and potentially the case could be over tomorrow. The jury could get the case tomorrow. If I don't see the defense putting on a long explanation other than, Sarah Boone getting on the stand. That's going to get everyone riled up to see what her performance is going to be like on the stand. I guarantee it's not going to be too good. So that's what we'll be looking forward to hearing tomorrow. Mike, your final thoughts.
Final thoughts. I think people have been tired of this case. It's been going on since 2020. And blessedly, this case will be done and it'll be in the record books and over by, say Wednesday maybe, or Thursday, the absolute latest. But it's time for George's family to get justice for him. And Sarah deserves justice for her. Whatever justice is for her, she deserves it. And it's about time.
Yeah, I think her justice is going to be convicted of murder second degree. Folks, just so you know, like when someone is awaiting a trial, they're not convicted, and they can't get out on bail or they can't get out on bond, they're in jail. Once a person is convicted of a felony, which means you can serve a year or more in prison, you go to prison. But you have to be convicted to go to prison. Jail, she's still like in a holding pattern, but all that time that she's already served counts toward her sentence, or whoever might serve time in a jail, that counts towards your ultimate sentence. Anyway, folks, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Today's case has a lot of interest, and I think everyone will look forward to whatever happens here, and we'll see if she testifies tomorrow. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff on behalf of myself and Professor Mike Geary. Have a great night, everyone, and God bless.
One episode